My name was partially inspired by Eric Liddell because my parents really liked the movie. But when he said, when I run, I feel God's pleasure, I do think there's an aspect to that. Like when you're doing the right thing that God wants you to do, it does feel good.
Welcome to the In Spirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join us as we explore current events and all manner of fascinating topics and explore their connections to Christian living.
Eric, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Father.
Yeah,
it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Sunil.
Yeah, Sunil, and this is the first time we've had Sunil on here too.
Oh, that's good.
Even though he's the head honcho here at Amoris Christi, but yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So for everybody listening, this is our special guest, Eric Wind, and he is the owner and operator of Wind Vintage, and he is one of the greatest experts in the world, a world-renowned expert on vintage watches. Right. So if there's anybody out there who is, and I'll confess, I've never looked into vintage watches. This is my watch. I don't know what that is.
That's solid. That's good.
But if anybody was looking at vintage watches, they would definitely come across your name, Eric's name. And so he has, from what I've read up, his lectures have drawn some of the biggest audiences on vintage watches. And he was the vice president and senior specialist of watches at Christie's. And now, of course, he has his own company. And he's been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the New Yorker, Financial Times, Chicago Tribune, Business of Fashion. I mean, so down the list. So that's kind of like those are the facts about you. How would you introduce yourself?
You did it perfectly.
Okay.
I love watches, vintage watches in particular. And it was something that sort of started as a hobby. It was all started by my grandfather's watch that I inherited after he passed away. I never thought it would lead to my job and starting a business and working for Christie's and all these different things. It was just something pretty special and cool. It was a gift from my grandmother to my grandfather for their wedding in 1947. And I had it right before my senior year at Georgetown. I began wearing it occasionally and really loved it, and then began reading more about watches, and my passion grew. And before I knew it, basically 6 years later, I was working for Christie. So it's pretty funny.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. That's beautiful, especially coming from such a meaningful family gift.
Yes.
That kind of set the tone for your life, huh?
Yeah, it was really, really neat. It's pretty unusual for sure.
Yeah. Now, I know that you have a very active faith, and you're in love with the Lord. I just pulled you away from the chapel where you're worshiping Jesus and praying the rosary. Could you tell us a little bit about your faith and your faith background as well?
Yeah. I grew up actually evangelical Christian, and I always had a strong faith, but I felt like something was missing when I was growing up. Like I didn't know exactly what it was, but I felt like I've taken all the kind of faith classes and formation and everything, but there's something just not quite right in the back of my head. And I went to Georgetown, not a place where a lot of people become Catholic, honestly, more a place where a lot of people lose their faith, I would say.
Very ironic.
For a lot of my friends in freshman year started going to church, and by sophomore year, they didn't go to church anymore. And I mean, that was pretty shocking to see, but there's maybe 30 priests that are there that are Jesuit. There were 3 that were really good, I can say, that I knew. And that had a big impact on me, and I was sort of not sure. I was going to originally a Baptist church in D.C., and then I would occasionally go to what they called late night mass, which was 11:15 p.m. I would often go like 4 times a week as a freshman and sophomore, or 5 times a week, and sometimes Sunday, but I'd go to my Baptist church as well. And then I basically didn't love the Baptist church, and then I went to like more of a mega church type thing, and then I went from that to an Episcopalian church. So I was kind of on the way toward Catholicism, more closer. And after Georgetown, I met a great priest, Father Arnie, Panula, who was a part of Opus Dei, and he was a great mentor. He was in Washington, D.C., and my roommate at that time, he grew up super evangelical, kind of like I did. We had basically met each other in college, but he was at Northwestern, and he became Catholic thanks to a priest at Northwestern, Father C.J. McCloskey. And then because of Father C.J., he knew Father Arnie. I met Father Arnie, and I was kind of on the path to becoming Catholic, I would say, and began reading the Catechism. And the Catechism, I was reading it, and it really feels like a divinely inspired book for me. Like, I felt like, I don't disagree with any of this, and that was kind of the magisterium aspect and everything else. That whole piece, I thought, was what was missing. Not that the church is made up of perfect people. Obviously, we're all imperfect, and particularly the church has had a lot of imperfect leaders over the years, but the institution itself was, in my view, created by Jesus, obviously given to Peter to kind of be the first pope, and that was what I really felt like coming home, like crossing the Tiber, as people say, but coming home. And I became Catholic in 2012, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's particularly beautiful because the catechism is definitely a fruit of the Holy Spirit working in the church. But I've never seen it the way that you just presented it, as one of the signs of how this really is the Lord's church, because even though it's composed of imperfect people, it's still an authentic guide to who Jesus really is, the authentic guide to who Jesus really is.
Yes.
And the fact that you, coming from a different background, could experience that through the catechism.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And then to bring it full circle, Father Tom Monahan, I think, had actually funded the development of our modern catechism around 1991, 1992. Pope John Paul II, I believe, had asked him to help support it, and he gave $5 million at that time to do it. And Sunil and I recently had dinner with Tom Monahan, and I told him kind of the story. I was like, the catechism really helped me become Catholic, and it was pretty cool. It was crazy. Tom Monahan founded Domino's and founded Ave Maria University, but he's given away, hundreds of millions of dollars to Catholic causes. Just Ave Maria University has cost almost $500 million out of his pocket to create.
Goodness. Wow.
So it's pretty incredible guy.
Wow. Yeah. So actually, I'm sitting here with two converts, right?
Yeah. Sunil's story is amazing too. You should tell your story if you haven't yet.
In fact, actually, before my baptism, I met the ceremonial priest for a letter to show it to the priest in India. He asked for, have you read the small catechism? I said, all I read was Catechism of Catholic Church. And then he said, you don't need anything else.
That's good. You're fine.
So it was a part of your conversion too, reading the catechism?
Yeah, I had because it answered many of my questions.
Same for me. Yeah, same for me.
I had goosebumps reading certain part of catechism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a spiritual director at the seminary, and pretty much for all I think for most of the guys who come, one of the first things I do is I print out the section on contemplative prayer in the catechism, and I usually ask people to read one paragraph a day in prayer, because it's kind of like a mystical, it's like it's supposed to be like a doctrinal thing, but the way it's written is just deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
So
I don't think enough people read it, honestly, or are familiar with it.
Or even know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, so you have this rich background of how the Lord led you, and you continue to deepen and grow in your faith. How has that sort of intertwined with your trajectory of in vintage watches, your success, your professional success?
It's not easy to be like a small business owner, I would say, in some sense. You kind of, when I left Christie's, I was leaving a solid job with a lot of benefits and everything else. You're kind of taking a leap, but you're not just jumping, you've done everything you can to really figure it out. There's a video of Tom Cruise basically preparing for this motorcycle jump. It's very fascinating, but how he spent months getting ready for this crazy jump off a cliff. But it's kind of like that when you're leaving a job where you know you have a set salary and everything else. And obviously a lot of prayer and everything else went into it, and discussions with my wife, Christine. And, it was a jump, but, at the end of the day, I think there's a simple prayer that I came up with that I try to say every day, which is, Lord, everything I have and everything I am is yours. And it's very simple. Like, it's just a surrendering that none of this stuff is ours. If you start feeling like you're holding on to everything too tight, it's not a good thing. Obviously, it's not what God's called us to do. He's called us to place our treasure in heaven, not in a place where moth and rust can eat it. And, I see that even in the world of watches. I've seen some people had their collections burned in the fires in Los Angeles recently in their homes. And I had a client who had a big fire and his entire watch collection was lost. He only had the watch on his wrist basically when he was out of the house at a dinner, and everything burned. And I know other people that have had their safes stolen out of their houses when they were gone and lose everything. So I love watches for what they represent, which is a very interesting intersection of history. Every watch that we make that's mechanical has had basically almost 1,000 years of kind of invention put into it that's been developed over time to improve, to figure out things like, the balance wheels. That was all an invention kind of 500 years ago that continues into watches today. And how all of this kind of builds on top of each other. Just like in mathematics, we build on, centuries of thousands of years of previous mathematicians figuring things out, and science as well.
And what is a balance wheel, just out of curiosity?
It's kind of what people call the heartbeat. It moves back and forth, and that's how energy basically is stored in a spring in the watch, and it's released through a series of gears that then go to the balance wheel, and the balance wheel moves, and that's what causes the seconds hand to tick. Wow. All of that needed to be developed from kind of nothing. And you have art also in these. And there's kind of a religious interesting aspect of watches, because the watch industry is strong in Switzerland because John Calvin, who believed in predestination and other things, he was very against jewelry and ornamentation, which was kind of more tied with the Catholic Church and the beauty of God. So all these jewelers basically in Switzerland had to convert to making watches, because he said watches were an okay thing to produce because it's practical and it helps people organize their days. And so
that is very revealing.
Yeah. So watches were okay, but jewelry not so much. But basically, watches have art, in terms of how they're made, the artisan aspect. A lot of times they have really, with vintage watches, interesting provenance, like it maybe was owned by a senator or president or world leader, all different interesting individuals. And I love that aspect, kind of the storytelling of them. But even on a personal front, it was so-and-so's watch, and, he received it for 25 years working here, or these sorts of things. There's a real interesting personal history to these watches.
That's fascinating, the thing that you said about Calvin to me, because our Catholic worldview is where, as you mentioned, you briefly mentioned that we can appreciate beauty, and not just that, but that it is one of the ways in which we experience God.
Yes.
Right. And perhaps I'm not like an expert on Calvinism or anything like that, but just from what you said and other things I know, there can be this attitude towards the world where, the world is fundamentally bad. The material world is fundamentally bad. And of course, it's not just in certain sects of Protestantism, but in many ancient religions too, right? The material world is bad in Platonism. And so you can deal with it if it's useful. And so what it ends up doing is that we we use things. We reduce anything that seems like beauty or inner goodness in something. We have to reduce it to where, no, it's just got to be a tool, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like what you're doing is, I don't know, in some way healing for our society, right? Because we, like Calvin, we can also get into that mode where everything is about efficiency and what it can produce for us. Is there any room for a story? Is there a room for beauty for its own sake,
Yeah. It was interesting because when I was writing it, I kind of fell into it. I just started writing about watches for a blog because I would see interesting things online, and I was spending an hour or two a day kind of looking at different interesting watches on eBay and other random places. And I never expected it would lead to anything more than just like a period of time where I'm writing some blog posts unpaid for a different blog. But I was like, is this kind of trivial? Because sometimes what we do is trivial and like not really useful. But I was praying about it, and like I felt very passionate about these watches. But I realized a few things. One, I do think if a person learns how to take care of a watch, they become a better person, honestly. And I sell watches to people like every day in all different aspects of life. And most of our society today is pretty, as I think Pope John Paul II would say, it's all kind of disposable, and he was saying life itself is disposable. But most of everything we have around us is not permanent. But back in the day, things were made with craftsmanship and time, because whatever you bought, whether it's a carpet or something else, the idea is that it would last for you in your family for generations. So you'd be more wise with it. And if you have a really great watch, like any pretty much great watch made in the last 100 years should last 500 years if it's properly taken care of. There's not very much in our lives that will last more than even 100 years or 50 years, or an iPhone might last 3 years. I don't know. So,
yeah, well, they intentionally make things to break now.
Yeah,
so.
The planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
So we, when I sell some young people watches, they really don't know actually how to take care of something. Like they kind of treat it badly, and they just don't know how to store it and kind of not treat it badly. So it is like I've seen people kind of, in a small sense, not overstating it, become better people because they learn how to take care of something valuable that they wanted. And there's nothing else really in their lives they've learned to treat with care in this way. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But it's also like one of the most meaningful things you can leave your children is a nice watch if they know that you've worn it and they've seen it as part of your lives. It has an additional imbued history and the memories of that person with that watch. I see it all the time. People inherit their dad's watch or their mom's watch, and it's very special to them. Other things in our lives don't have the same meaning. Like your mom's engagement ring might not mean the same. Most people just kind of sell it or just throw it in the drawer, everything else. But a watch is more personal. And it, of course, represents the most fundamental gift we have, which is time. So it is metaphorical as well. And I always try to ask God to help me use my time efficiently, because we have only so much time each day. So you don't want to waste it. You want to be a good steward of your time and your resources.
Yeah, I was thinking about, as you were speaking, about how a world where things, of course, in your expertise, it's in watches, right? But things in general are imbued with meaning and stories. They're passed down. They have history. That just seems a lot healthier, for a society. And you get some of that when you read like Tolkien, right? Lord of the Rings, and every single object has its own history.
Yes.
Right? This is the sword that so-and-so, everything, in there. Even like a tree, or everything has a story embedded in it. And I feel like that's probably the way that the Lord made the world, in terms of everything being a bearer of meaning for us. And now with things being designed for just utility and to be discarded. And again, sometimes that's intentional. With the light bulb, they intentionally started making it so that it would break after a while. Something has been lost, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so it's cool to me that you found this path partly through prayer. You said, I noticed that you said, you were like getting into this and you're like, is this just like a hobby? And you prayed about it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Can you
I was like, I just don't want my career to be trivial. Like, I don't want what I'm doing to, I definitely wouldn't want it to take someone off of like a path to a good life, obviously. I don't think you can be a drug dealer and a saint, for instance. It's not, those are conflicting. I didn't think being a watch dealer would be conflicting with a Christian life, but I wasn't sure if it is just trivial. Is this like actually important or not? I think I prayed a lot about it and felt like this is something that God has given me as a path to pursue and something I love. And I do love the Protestant movie Chariots of Fire a lot. It's my favorite movie. But when Eric Little's talking about, my name was partially inspired by Eric Little because my parents really liked the movie. But when he said, when I run, I feel God's pleasure, I do think there's an aspect to that. Like when you're doing the right thing that God wants you to do, it does feel good. I do love watches. I love what they represent, and I love what I get to do every day, which is essentially be, I would say, a guardian of these watches, someone who shares them with other people. And it's what I would say it's my profession, but my vocation as well, what I do as a kind of a person who sells watches and vintage watches in particular.
How did you, from a startup, from just leaving the job, into becoming the world's best expert on vintage watches? What was that trajectory and journey?
It's not, it's not really something you can plan, but I would tell someone, people come to me all the time and say, how can I become an expert in watches or other things? And I would say the best thing you can do is write about them, because if you're writing, whether it's it doesn't need to be a book, but I'm working on a book right now, but articles, blog, there's so many free opportunities to write things online or start your own blog or whatever. If you can write about something and synthesize information in a smart way and not plagiarize it, then that's how you become an expert, because you learn the material in the process of writing it. It's the same with school. My fear is, looking forward 5 to 10 years, no one's writing anything because they're just using ChatGPT to scrape the internet, basically. But to really become an expert, you have to write about it. And it was the same at Christie's. You have to write compelling pieces about the watches you have coming up for auction, write what we call lot notes, or the footnotes in the catalog about why is this watch special, what's the history of it. That is a way you become an expert, more than anything else.
I never expected that. I was planning to ask you the same question, because I was like, how do you become a world expert in anything? I would have never guessed that the answer was writing, but now that you say it, it makes sense.
And you can't, when you're writing about a specific topic, like you can't just do a junky job, because you've got all the top people that want to read it. And if you start saying things that aren't true and everything else, they'll immediately discard you. So you can kind of read my writing over the years. I was very careful about not wanting to say anything incorrect, because I know the people come out with pitchforks that this is their passion and say, how could you say that? That's so silly. So you have to be precise. Otherwise you'll lose the audience very quickly. And that's really important. But I think a lot of people, they don't know how to write, and now there's all the social media platforms that weren't there when I started writing about watches in 2010. And people think, if I just post photos, I'm an expert. But they really don't know anything. They're just showing photos of whether it's cars or jewelry or watches, any object, art. The art of being able to write about something is being lost. So that's my biggest concern for the future, I would say.
And you were willing to do this for free.
Yes.
In the beginning.
Yeah, I was. There was a blog called HODINKEE that was started by a guy basically during the financial crisis because he was sitting at his desk at UBS. His name was Ben Clymer and had nothing to do. And they said, you just have to come to work, but you can do whatever you want on the internet. So he just started a blog about watches. And basically in 5 years, it went to be one of the top 100 sites on the internet, according to Time magazine. So it was like a crazy trajectory from just like random, pursuits online. But I started writing for them about just under 2 years in. It was still very, very new and not many people knew about it. And he was about to head to journalism school at Columbia, and I was sending him interesting things I saw online, and he said, hey, why don't you write about that? I'm not going to have quite as much time to do this because I'm going to journalism school.
So how did you get in touch with him?
Just the email address
really?
online, because I was very obsessed. I was like, this thing's incredible. I really am enjoying it. And that was really my gateway in for a lot of people as well, reading about vintage watches. He did it in a very accessible, here's 3 to 5 paragraphs about an interesting watch for sale online or coming up for auction. And then it causes you to kind of want to learn more. It's very digestible. It's like 1 or 2 articles per day, typically. So then I began doing that, and the rest was history.
Wow. Yeah, I love being around passionate people.
Yeah.
The what was the line that you quoted from Chariots of Fire?
When I run, I feel his pleasure.
I feel his pleasure. Yeah, I mean that's something I can personally relate to in things that I feel very passionate about. And what I love about your story is that you were passionate about this thing. You reached out to this guy, and you're sending him things. And it's not like you're at that point you're saying, you know what, I'm strategizing to start my own vintage watch company, right?
No, that was the last thing on my mind.
You just know that you feel God's pleasure in this. And there's something about it. And you take it to prayer because, is this really it? And you get that encouragement, in the gentle ways of the Spirit. And so you just start acting. You start writing. And then next thing you know, you're writing. Yeah, I feel like if we can all engage in our gifts in a similar way, I believe we would see fruitfulness of that kind, different kinds of fruitfulness where we're passionate. The Lord has placed certain gifts and passions in our heart, and then we act on it, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, there's that gospel passage where Jesus says that they're the 3 different servants who have been entrusted with the talents, right? And it's kind of a harsh passage in a way because, the worst guy out of the 3 is the guy who just saved the money. It's not like he lost it. He gave back what he got. But I think Jesus is trying to make a really strong point there, which is that I've given you something, and that's to be multiplied. Right?
Yeah, go and use it.
Go and use it. Right.
He's promoting entrepreneurship.
yeah, exactly. It's kind of literally that because, they were trading it, I think, and they made it back. And so I don't know, when you look back at your life, are you able to recognize, like, it's a little bit of a deep question, but what was it that was given to you, do you think?
I had a lot of gifts, but I talk about this with my son Charlie, who's 11, and I think different aspects of his life, even just as he starts 6th grade in the fall, the thing that I really hate, and Christine hates as well, is a lack of pursuit of excellence. And I do think Jesus hated that as well, and through that story and others. And I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin called Manitowoc. I may be the only person in the history of that town to go to Georgetown. It's a solid kind of blue-collar town. But I told Charlie just this week, actually, yesterday, I said, there's no way I would have gotten out of Manitowoc except by working really, really hard in school. Like, there was no other route for me to Georgetown and then working in D.C. and then going to Oxford for an MBA. that doesn't just happen. It's not just given to you. So I was given a really great gift of a great mind, I would say, and intelligence. But God's blessed me really in many, many ways. And I said the same, for him, like, I don't want to see him wasting time unless people in whatever program, whether it's athletics or academics, are pursuing excellence. And that is, I would say, if I was to like have a life motto, it's like in pursuit of excellence. That would be what I would say today.
That's good. In pursuit of excellence.
And that's what I try to do with the watches that we sell as well. Like people do buy from us because we're not like, it could be as simple as, so take like this is a vintage Rolex watch. If you buy it from certain other dealers or auction houses, you're going to get it and the crystal's all scuffed up and it's not running, and literally you put it on and the bracelet's never been cleaned and you get dirt all over your wrist when you're wearing it, and there's no real care. We're not trying to alter the watch, but we are trying to preserve it and like at least clean all the dirt out of it and everything else so you can have a great wearing experience with it. And they ship it to you, and the watch is floating around in the box. It's not packed well. Like every aspect, I try to have the experience as if how I want to purchase a watch, and that is with excellence in a very ordered way. We check all the watches for water resistance and try to make them water resistant if possible, which I think we're probably the first dealer in history to ever do.
Oh, neat.
So we'll replace the gaskets and do everything to make sure the watch is protected when you're wearing it. If it's in the rain, it's not going to flood out or get damaged. So we try to pursue excellence in what we do, and that is also why we've grown, I would say, a lot as a company, because people don't have time to kind of buy it and then pay a top price and then have to deal with all these other aspects. Like, they want to get it and know they can just go and enjoy it. The same as I want to do if I'm buying a car. I don't want to take it into the shop the next day, or if I'm buying, whatever item, I don't want it to break in a day or two. Like I want it to work well from the beginning, because I don't have time to really be investing in that. So that's also how we try to treat our business and our clients.
Awesome. In pursuit of excellence. And you also said that Jesus, you think that Jesus hates when we don't,
Yes.
when we don't pursue excellence. I don't know. Do you want to share a little bit more about that? Just in terms of, just how you understand that, what the Lord desires for us, and
Yeah. I mean, I think, I feel like, of course, the story you said, but even when he went into the temple and was upset with the money changers, I think, of course, the one aspect was what they had turned the temple to, but it was also the lack of pursuit of excellence and focus on Jesus, of course. But I just feel like it was just like a disaster when he got in there. I imagine animals running around and everything else, and it wasn't what he wanted for God's house. But I think it was also just, come on, guys, we need to get it together here a little bit. So is
that how you feel when you walk into some of our parishes? Is that what you're trying?
and going back to the aspect of beauty, like I think obviously there's so many churches that leave so much to be desired because they've stripped it down too much. And like, I love a beautiful church like the Basilica of St. Edward, where you go in and you feel God's majesty and beauty, and St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. Like, the fact it's right there in kind of the heart of the city, what a blessing. I worked a few blocks away at Christie's and would go over there and just be like, wow, this is incredible that it's basically right in the center of the city. What an amazing thing.
So like, for every person, I mean, the Lord wants us to to cultivate the gifts, to pursue excellence. And through that, we get to experience the fullness of who we are. There's a sense of bringing delight to the Father because we're his children, and, he enjoys to see us grow and develop and do things and co-create with him, And
there's another line I actually quoted a lot to Charlie as well, my son, from Chariots of Fire. You can honor God by peeling a spud if you peel it to perfection. Wow. So I always tell him that. And that was the point, that Eric Little's dad was having, because he had the same feeling. Is running trivial? Is this really honoring God? Or should I be a missionary right now in China? His sister was like, this is basically a big waste of time, your running career. And but then basically Eric's dad and one of his good friends, Sandy, were like, no, God made you a runner. You can really praise him through what you're doing and honor God. He's given you this gift. You've got to pursue it. And that's when he did the peeling a spud quote. But it's
That's cool.
I watched it with Charlie, and it did impact him. And, we talk about it a lot.
Oh, that's
Whatever
good.
you're doing, just pursue it with excellence.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric, for the focus on excellence. Because for Amoris Christi, our vision is forming leaders in holiness and excellence.
That's great. That's perfect.
So, as students of in the area of excellence, will you able to give us some guidance, how can we grow in excellence?
That's true.
And forming people, leaders in excellence.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. I mean, I think a lot of people, it starts young. I think it does start with young people, because I saw it with my son and his classmates. Some of the classmates kind of from first, second grade were very happy with B's, whatever. And I was like, Charlie, we're not just happy with just getting by and getting a B. He's not, thankfully, that guy. But some of his classmates were like, I got straight B's, I don't care, basically, in second grade. And I'm kind of like, wow, that's not really a great sign for their life if they're just doing the minimum to get by. And it drove me crazy with kind of reading about the younger generation today, with the quiet quitting, with whatever minimal Mondays, or these stupid things where they're like, oh, we just try to do the minimal amount of work on a Monday. And I'm like, what? Have you heard of that?
No.
Yes. Yeah. And I just go to my desk and I do the minimal amount of work possible, and that quiet quitting phenomenon and all this stuff. I'm like, what's the point of working? They're just collecting a paycheck.
Yeah.
And that's not honoring anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually wanting to ask you, Sunil, you probably work with more young people than most people that we know. What do you think are the obstacles that prevent people from pursuing excellence? Because, when you lay it all out there, it seems like, why wouldn't you? Right? I mean, You can cultivate your gifts. You can have a great impact. I mean, like when we look at your life, you've been featured by all these different magazines, and I've seen some of your interviews where they ask you a question and you say, well, I gave my life to Jesus Christ, and you're able to witness. So why wouldn't a person pursue excellence? What do you think?
I think excellence is very connected with the way God created us to be excellent with our true self. When we encounter our real self, I think that is the true pleasure. For me, I notice any young person and all of us, when we do what we are called to do and succeed, then there is real joy. And joy is the fuel for excellence.
Yep, for sure.
And the obstacle, I think there is a sense of negativity or something that it comes from that lack of connection with our own humanity, our giftedness, just treating everything as, I will do just to pass by. Yeah. I'll do something just let me. I think I always think if you just get a job, buy a home, produce some children, what's the legacy you are leaving in this world? This is what I ask my children. My son, I ask, what is if you, Johnny, his name is John Paul, if you leave this world, what is the legacy that the world is going to remember? What is that footprint that you have made in advancement of society? I think that excellence is very connected with advancement of our humanity.
For sure. Yeah, no question.
All of our recent popes have emphasized this to young people, I remember Pope Francis I think it was in Brazil. He kind of coined the phrase, I think it was sofa happiness, and it's just like, there's a culture where you just sit on your sofa.
Couch potatoes.
Yeah, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. and you just watch TV or you use drugs and all of this stuff. And he basically asked them, what mark are you going to leave on the world? But yeah, there's probably listening to you, there's probably a sense in many people that I just need to get by. I just need to survive. And when you're in survival mode, the idea that you can thrive is not even, you can't even entertain that thought.
Correct.
And there must be some interior struggles in a person where they feel like they're just surviving,
So the philosopher Joseph Piper says that when an animal gets the food and when it is full, it sleeps. But when man is full, he asks the question, what is next?
Yeah, that's true. He also said leisure is the basis of culture, which is true.
Yeah.
To some extent, excellence is also coming to fill the cup. I remember that in 2007-8, there was a sense of maybe the Lord is calling to be a missionary. Then as I was praying, the Lord said, fill up your cup. I want you at this time, fill up your time, your resource, and give fully. Then I will call you at a particular time when it is needed. And he called after a few years.
That's good.
So I would also say, wherever you are, you give your best.
Yes. For sure.
Wow. Yeah. Actually, I would think my story is somewhat similar to that, in terms of the priesthood. Because I was a software developer before, and I definitely experienced the Father's pleasure, and I still do when I program, when I do awesome. Programming. But it was that sense of giving it your all and all of that stuff. And right when I was at that moment of giving my all there is when all of a sudden he called me to the priesthood, It's kind of mysterious how that works.
That's amazing.
Yeah, something profound there. Yeah. Well, when you think about our young people today, and both of you have talked about conversations you've had with your children. Eric, what kind of advice would you give to a young person today? Let's say they're, in high school, early college, and they're at that point in life where they can set the trajectory for their future. I don't know, any advice that you can share?
I do think learning to write is important, but I tell people this all the time, even professionally. The most important thing you can do is think about what you're trying to achieve at any given moment. So it sounds stupid. It's so simple, but it's not clear, what even people in politics are trying to achieve exactly. I wish they would articulate it, or business leaders talking with people. You're only going to be successful if you know exactly what you're trying to achieve in both kind of a broad sense, but specifically what are you trying to do in the next week, in the next year, in the next 5 years or 10 years. So always be objective oriented, and that is how you can kind of move forward, I would say. In terms of broad things, learn how to write, because a lot of people don't know how to write today. So it doesn't need to be flowery or lengthy, but be effective, short, and don't rely on ChatGPT and other things to write for you. And, be able to have a conversation with people like we're doing today. A lot of young people haven't really learned the art of conversation because they're just on their phones. I was reading an article by a friend of mine who writes for the LA Times, and they just instituted a cell phone ban for the LA Unified School District, so they have to put the phones in these kind of magnetic cases. But basically at lunchtime, the cafeteria was completely quiet because everyone's looking at their phones all day. But now that they don't have cell phones, it's alive with energy. Like really? At any cafeteria you imagine, their kids are actually talking to each other and having conversations, and that's just the way the world was made, not to sit on your phone all day. But those things are really important.
That's cool. Yeah. So engaging with people and writing. I'm like I said earlier, I think you're probably the person who has emphasized that the most, in terms of people I've spoken to, the importance of writing. Is it from your story, you shared about how writing helped you because it sort of forced you to rise to a level of excellence, right? Because of the fact that you have to write.
Yeah.
So I think just extrapolating from your story, writing, perhaps one of the reasons why people don't write is because it's only for a grade or it's only for school, but maybe being able to write for a blog or something where you feel like your writing has some impact or something like that can help probably.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
And you can write even on the social media platforms itself, maybe not X or whatever, because it's 140 characters, but like Instagram, you could write like 1,000 words or something crazy and still do that. And I find some of those posts really interesting when people write a lot about a given watch. That's a really good way to do it as well. It doesn't have to be a blog, but most people keep it very short and, on Instagram or whatever, and there, just keep it moving.
Right.
Are there times like you wrote something and you think, oh, this is absolutely not
correct later?
Not correct or not professional or compare, and you feel comparison with other watch experts, and is there those
Especially
kind of challenges?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not good enough. Many. One thing that stands against excellence in many young people that I notice is whatever they produce, they have a innate feeling, this is not good enough. This is not worth anything. So how do you overcome, somebody starts writing, start producing, these obstacles because there are experts already there.
Yeah.
Before you, there were many watch experts. And how do you overcome, and from there, you get into the top?
I think if you cultivate friendships with people that are experts or whatever, you can get their feedback and support, and that kind of positive reinforcement was really helpful. I was writing for this blog, and they had a lot of people that would leave, positive remarks after I wrote. And that was always gratifying every week, because you get to say, oh, this is another great article and very interesting. I love this. Like, that kind of positive feedback was good. It was especially helpful because the job I had at the time I did, which was not in watches, it was a real struggle for me, and I didn't feel particularly well respected in my job, and it was feeling kind of a struggle, like walking through cement. And watches were like a really gratifying thing, because I would still get really good feedback every week when I would do typically one article a week, and it was nice to be like, get that kind of positive feedback, And I think, man, if I didn't have that, it would have been very depressing just to have the job I had at the time and not feel particularly listened to by my bosses, even though I had good advice and everything else. That was, so it was a real godsend, actually, even during that time, to have that.
So have some supportive environment or community where your work you can receive feedback and encouragement and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, people would say, oh, maybe not that one. Or it's okay that not everyone loves everything you do. That's another kind of, I would say, worry for a lot of young people, because they just are surrounded by everyone clapping and participation trophies only, and everything is great. Yeah. And, the world isn't necessarily that great. Like, you're going to at some point run up against it where someone doesn't like something you do. It's not realistic. So.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, to produce one article per week, what is the amount of research, writing altogether? How much time you spend in producing an article?
Especially when you began.
Yeah, when I began, sometimes I would spend as much as 30 hours to do one article.
Wow.
And have 30 watches in it. So I would be spending evenings and weekends doing that. My wife was supportive at that time, which was great. And, it showed, because I spent a lot of time on it and people liked it.
And this was for free.
Originally for free, then it was $100 a week. So it was like, if you took 30 hours times $100, it was just over $3 per hour. Then it was $150, then it went to $300. Even $300 at 30 hours is $10 an hour. But I was like, it's okay. So
that's the drive for excellence right there.
Yeah.
The 30 hours a week for free. or for $3 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you loved it, because you were passionate about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you were surrounded, you had your wife who was also supportive.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
helps.
You got to have a supporting
I
team
think
around you.
that's the key of excellence when I read almost all leadership books. This perseverance, this amount of effort, even great startup companies, big companies, corporate world, they had a similar story of relentless, numerous hours without any profit, without any gain.
Yes, yeah, it's true. It's
Well,
true.
yeah, this has been great. I
Thank
mean,
you so
very,
much, Father.
very helpful. I mean, I have a lot to reflect on just listening to you here. And I think we need to make our students here write more at the School of Nazareth.
That's good.
And I'm inspired to write.
Yeah,
that's
there you
good.
go.
What can I write?
Yeah, it's good.
Maybe if you could, just as on a closing note, I was wondering if you could take us into one of your favorite watches, along the lines of what we were talking about, the story, the patrimony, the embedded meaning, just the beauty that you experience in it, just so we can all share in that,
Yes.
vicariously through you.
I should have been wearing a Rolex Submariner, but that's probably my favorite vintage watch all time. It is a watch that originally came out around 1953. It was designed for diving. And Rolex was one of the first companies to really make a water-resistant watch. And it's a simple concept today because it's like every plastic bottle has a bottle cap that turns. But at that time, there were no watches that had the threads to really turn the case back. So this is a Daytona, but basically there's grooves and you have a tool that unscrews it. And then the crown is a screw-down crown. So basically you unscrew it, again, like a bottle cap, and then you turn it and screw it down. And that helps keep water out of it.
Wow.
And that was a game changer for watches. And
So that's how they do the waterproofing, is just by using the
basically
thread?
that with rubber as a
Gotcha.
gasket, so like an O-ring. And the Submariner, it became kind of an iconic watch, even though how many people are diving every day. Sean Connery wore one as James Bond and Dr. No, and so many different people. Robert Redford wears one. It became kind of the quintessential sports watch. It's how a lot of people have spent their first check on Wall Street. Their first bonus check is to go buy a Submariner and kind of wear it the rest of their lives. It's just a simple, great utilitarian watch. It's no frills, like your simple steel Submariner, no gold really, and not very simple, designed to glow in the dark at night. But it was like a grail watch for me when I first got into watches, that I wanted to buy a Submariner. My dad always loved the Submariner, and that was kind of one of my first memories of watches. We went into a Rolex store in Colorado on our kind of summer vacation in 8th grade as a family. And he was just practically salivating over it in the store. And he's like, your sister's starting college and you're about to, you're in 8th grade, you're going to be in college soon, so I really shouldn't buy this watch. I think it was $3,000 at the time or something like that. And for his 70th birthday, I gave him a Submariner in Wisconsin at Lambeau Field. Funnily enough, he was completely shocked. But that was like a really cool moment. So the Submariner is always going to be a special watch for me. Cool. And I spent years looking for my own Submariner.
And they're all from the 50s, or did they continue making
No,
them?
they continued making it today.
Okay.
So I bought one from the 1960s I love.
Oh, wow.
And I love it.
Awesome. Well, again, Eric, thank you so much, and I look forward to future conversations with you.
Thank you so much, Father. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the In Spirit podcast. In Spirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.